Anyway, what happened was I began to ask more and more questions about the laboratory notebooks because I realized the laboratory notebooks, I'm holding a page in my hand, contained the key information, and even though I knew what had happened in the laboratory, and I knew that it did not correspond to what was in the publications, I had never seen the laboratory notebooks. And so I asked with increasing frequency, may I see these? May I see these? No, you may not. And finally, I read the law, the general statutes of the state of North Carolina on this subject, and I read section 132.6, where it was very clear that things like scientific data, laboratory notebooks, should be in the public record. There's no exclusion, such as a personnel record, that could possibly apply to a laboratory notebook. What reason could you possibly have for denying a scientist access to scientific data? Well, they did, because when I went to them and explained to them that I'd read the law, they said, well, you're not a lawyer, you don't know the law, and we say that this is part of a personnel file, which is apparently what they say about everything. And they denied my access to these documents, laboratory notebooks. So finally I went and I got a lawyer. His name was Mike Toddy, and he had coffee, as he put it, several times. Actually, it cost me a fair bit of money simply to gain access to these laboratory notebooks. Finally, the university relented, and 1 year and 6 months after the investigation was concluded with its finding of falsification, but quote-unquote no research misconduct, I was allowed to see the laboratory notebooks. And here's what I found. Let me just show you one page which says it all. So on this page, you can see some images of some hexagonal-shaped particles. In the science paper, they said that the particles that they had studied were metallic palladium. Now, if the particles were metallic palladium, they would be, even though very small, they would be like a metal. And if you put them under an electron beam, the electron beam could diffract, meaning the electrons could change their direction. But the electron beams, it is well known, do not destroy or degrade metals. It doesn't happen. The melting point of palladium is over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So even a small palladium particle is going to have a very, very high melting temperature. So this degraded particle, this particle that looks like it's just falling apart, what is that? Well, the student, her name is Lena Gugliotti, and she wrote on the 7th of November 2002, which would be a year and a half before they published in Science. Note, when looking for a particle to study by electron diffraction, that would be shooting electrons through it, it appears that our particles are degrading. See images below. I looked at the other grids, that would be the other samples for this method, from other days and found the same degradation. And so this clearly shows that the graduate student must have known that the particles were not composed of palladium metal, that they were composed of something else, and I would say that if you just know anything about electron diffraction, you would say this is something like a carbon material, like a plastic or something like that. The starting material that they used was a compound